Our New Testament reading this morning is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of humans and angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. And as for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. But then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Holy wisdom, holy word. Thanks be to God. Well, today is February 2nd, so happy Candlemas. Also known as the Feast of the Presentation of Jesus Christ, it marks 40 days after Christ's birth, when Mary and Joseph would have presented Jesus at the temple, according to the Gospel of Luke's narrative. In some traditions, this marks the end of the Christmas Epiphany holiday season. So if, like me, you still have your Christmas decorations up, it's okay to have left them up until now. Historically, excuse me, to mark this feast, people would take candles to church to have them blessed and use them for the rest of the year as a symbol of Jesus, the light of the world, going with you into the world. Hence the alternative name Candlemas. And also for this reason, I think maybe feel free to leave your Christmas lights up all year. But I digress. The celebration of Candlemas takes place on the 2nd of February, and various lore and folktale emerged for this holy day, as it does with many other holidays. Things like, if the weather is clear on Candlemas, we will have a prolonged winter. So logically, we can see how that could turn into a tradition where a groundhog emerges on a bright winter day, sees its shadow, and startled goes into hiding for 6 more weeks of a prolonged winter. Happy Groundhog Day. The lore of this day can no longer be separated from the 1993 film Groundhog Day. Now, the film is as philosophical as it is comedic, and the phrase Groundhog Day has taken on the meaning of an inescapable monotony of life. However, the heart of the film is the desire to transcend that existence. You may recall the film, known for its repetition, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do. The protagonist, Pittsburgh weatherman Phil Connors, played by Bill Murray, travels to Punxsutawney for the annual Groundhog Day festivities. Phil is selfish, egotistical, and regards those around him with contempt. He doesn't want to be in the small town any longer than he has to be. But at the end of the day, a blizzard keeps him from leaving town. He wakes up the next morning to find himself not only stuck in town, but stuck in time as well. There was, in fact, no tomorrow. But instead, he is reliving the same February 2nd again and again and again and again and again and again. Now, Phil first tries to make the most of his new circumstance and lives hedonistically, without consequence, living life as a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. Then he becomes depressed at his changeless existence. Although he has seemingly prophetic powers and there are no mysteries of that day left to him, he becomes nihilistic. But in his all-knowingness, the one thing he doesn't know yet is love. He cynically tries to seduce Rita, played by Andie MacDowell, whose cheerfulness and sweetness is a counterpoint. She is the embodiment of hope and faith in humanity. She always toasts to world peace, and she consistently refuses Phil's selfish advances. Now, out of boredom and curiosity, Phil eventually learns all the places and moments of need that occur that day, and he works to change various outcomes for the better. Phil develops a pattern of catching the kid who falls out of the tree, fixing a flat tire for some elderly women, even performing the Heimlich on the mayor who is choking on his dinner. And some days he can make someone's February the 2nd a better day. But no matter how he tries to help, there is still one old man who dies by the end of the day. Only then does Phil really seem to start learning how to love. He may seem to know everything, but he cannot control all things. And in realizing that he cannot truly control what happens, he eventually develops a sincere interest in the well-being of others. He continues to help others, knowing that it might not change everything, but it made that day on repeat more loving. No longer arrogant and boastful, no longer rude and insisting on his own way, Phil has learned to love, not simply in a romantic sense, but in a philanthropic way, in the way of loving his fellow human beings. It is through that love that he eventually makes it through to a new day. Now, if you picked up on those comparisons between Phil's behavior and our epistle reading, I should say that Paul is not writing to one single person, but to a community. It is not about a journey of a lifetime toward being a more loving person only. He is writing to a community that is rife with conflict. The church at Corinth doesn't know how to love one another. They are divided by class lines between rich and poor, between powerful and lowliest slaves. But those divisions are antithetical to living together as a church. All are members of the body of Christ. All are important. And as we heard last week, hands, feet, eyes, ears, mouth, nose, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, all are connected and integral to the oneness of the body, and therefore also to Christ's church. As individuals, their behavior toward one another has to change if they want their church to live to see another day. Those who have done wrong by lording themselves over others must stop and learn to love everyone. And if they are to be one community, those who were wronged or oppressed also have the hard work of forgiving to allow for reconciliation, i.e., not holding on to grudges. Love, which never ends, does not simply live life on repeat. Rather, love carries life forward from one day to the next, enduring each new day as we hope for peace to come. In our gospel reading, the adult Jesus proclaims the words of the prophet Isaiah are filled in his presence. And we know that in his ministry, Jesus spoke against economic injustice and against the everyday social hierarchies that divided even small villages. Jesus tended to the needy first, but also helped those who were willing to humble themselves. His own sense of call and community expanded from those who were like him, moving to those who were foreigners, living out the reality that God's love is for everyone. We witnessed the fullness of God's compassion for those facing injustice when Jesus died on a cross. And we learned of love that endures all things, even death, through the resurrection. Through Jesus, we know we are welcomed by a God who embraces us in our frailties and imperfections. We are comforted by a God who mourns with us, and we are encouraged by God to do the work of building up a new way of being that is defined by this type of love instead of power. Now, in church, we choose to rehearse this story on repeat, from Christmas to Candlemas, from Easter through Kingdom Tide, and starting again in Advent. We proclaim the life-altering reality of God with us, of divine justice and grace in response to oppression, and the eternal love of God, so that we do not become numb to the injustices around us. You and I cannot make someone love their neighbor. We cannot control what is in another's heart, but we can show what is in our hearts. Now today, Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow, but whether we would have been in store for an early spring or are supposed to have 6 more weeks of winter, we know that dreariness isn't about being stuck in a season. It is about feeling hopeless in a weary world. And it is our task to be witnesses to the light of Christ in those bleak times. It is our task to carry our blessed candles out into the world, because we are called to show up as part of the good in the world, even now. Even when the world seems stuck in a never-ending cycle of bad news, even when every day seems to bring something unbelievable and unbearable, even now, even now, even now, even now, we will feed the hungry every day. Even now, we will welcome the stranger every day. Even now, we will act with kindness to those who are persecuted, especially now. And when we cry out for justice, we will not lose sight of the humanity of those who act as our enemies, even now. We will do these things even when we won't see immediate results or significant change. We will continue to show up even now, because every day is an opportunity for love to endure. Thanks be to God.